Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are going to be doing a full-length, non-spoilery review of The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, the first book in the Gilded Wolves trilogy. So this trilogy is a young adult historical fantasy, and in it we are following a group of people who are being led by a young man by the name of Severin, and they are in the business of acquisition of magical objects, aka they steal them. And they are in the middle of a theft when a few of them end up getting caught. Now, the person that catches them says, "Hey, I need you to pull a really big heist for me. And if you do it for me, I will also ensure that Severin gets to have the inheritance that he was denied in prior years." And Severin looks at that and says, "Well then, okay." And the story goes from there. So, first up, let's mention some content warnings. As a side note with content warnings, I am really bad at noticing specific ones. And so I will always mention the ones that I notice specifically, but you should also check out the link down below. I will have a link to this book's page on Storygraph. The lovely thing about Storygraph is that users are able to tag content warnings, and you can see them, and they are divided up in by severity, so severe, medium, mild, and it'll also show you how many people tagged it, so you can see kind of what the consensus is as to what the content warnings are. But because in this one I noticed that there was emotional abuse and some torture, but I believe that there are a few others that are tagged on the Storygraph page, so if you are interested, again, link down below. So first up, let's talk about the world building. And so, okay, let's talk about the setting, because I mentioned that it was a historical fantasy, but I didn't say where. It is actually set in Paris in 1886, I want to say, when the World Expo, I think it's called, was set to open in Paris. Now, I do think that the author did a really good job ensuring that it felt like Paris, right? It didn't feel like just some generic city where we could have just been anywhere. It felt a lot like Paris, I think. I've never been to Paris, but it felt like there were definitely mentions of various places in Paris and that kind of thing. But it also didn't really feel like it needed to be set at this specific time and place, because things like the World Expo didn't really have any kind of an impact on our story. It just seemed to be there. And so I'm not really sure what the point is of setting it in this particular time period in this particular city. So like points for making sure that it wasn't a generic city, but I'm not entirely certain of like what the point was for setting it in this specific city at this specific time, when it doesn't really end up having that much of an impact on the story. Let's talk about some of the political stuff. So I mentioned that this is a magical society, that there are magical objects. There are a lot of different people that can create these magical objects, but there are there's a handful of ruling houses. And in Paris, there used to be 4, but now there's only 2. And there's definitely political intrigue here, right? Like, there's definitely some maneuvering and house politics and all that kind of really interesting stuff that we didn't go very much in depth on, which makes sense because we just really didn't have that much time to dive into it when it really wasn't the point of this story. I really liked it, and it seems like this is going to be the kind of thing that we develop over the course of the trilogy, and I'm so excited to see what happens there. And then lastly, let's talk about the magic system, because clearly there is magic in this world, and this is the great failing of the world building, in that there is definitely magic, and there is no explanation for it. So it's not like there's spells, it's that people create magical objects, but we don't really know how or like why or if there are any limitations. There's nothing, we don't know who's born with disability. Like, we don't know. We don't understand. We don't understand much of anything about the magic system. And there are explanations given that basically say not much of anything at all. And it was really frustrating because I didn't know, like, it felt kind of like our inventors within this group were able to create whatever objects they needed for the heist without any kind of problems with it, which was a little frustrating. It felt a little Deus Ex Machina, right? And I was just like, I'm not really comfortable with this. Um, and because I didn't know if it ever crossed the line or if there was anything that really shouldn't have been allowed or anything like that, is very frustrating. I really like rules to be in place for this kind of stuff, and we just really weren't given any. I'm hoping that we find out more in later books because this really is very, very bothersome for me. Other than that, I thought this was a really interesting magic system that you don't cast spells, you just create magical objects. I just thought that was really a very interesting way to go. So next up, let's talk about the characters. And with this, we're also going to be talking about representation. So first up, we have Severin. Severin is part French and part North African, and he is a little bit of angsty kind of character. I don't really love him. I didn't connect with him in any way, and I'm not really sure why. Like, I don't know. I just kind of really struggled with his chapters, and I really tried to figure out what was up, but I just unfortunately don't really know. So he was not my most favorite character, and he's the leader of this group, but I don't really know why other than he put the group together. I'm not really sure what he contributes. I guess that's my big thing. I don't really know what he contributes to the group. Maybe we'll find out in later books. I don't know. And then we have Hypnos, and Hypnos is actually a little bit of a rival of sorts, of a little bit of an antagonist to Severin. But Hypnos is also mixed race. He is part French and part Haitian, and he is also very queer. He very much is into men, and it's just, he flirts. It's funny, and he's kind of got that over the top, like, drama kind of thing going on. But honestly, he is just like this eager little puppy that like so wants to be loved. And I actually really enjoyed the dynamic that he ended up bringing to this particular group. After that, we have Tristan, and actually Tristan is one of the characters we see the least of. He's kind of a little bit of a recluse, but the general feeling that I got from him is that he's kind of like everybody's little brother, and they all kind of want to love him. They all love him. They kind of just want to protect him. And he ends up doing some of the inventing. And then we have Layla, and Layla is Indian, and she is this very famous dancer in Paris under a stage name, of course. And Layla is really great, and she's so much a mother hen, but the kind of mother hen that like has a bit of a backbone to her, and she's just a really interesting kind of character. I really liked her backstory. I thought that was incredibly interesting, and she seems to be the person that is much more of the con man, is able to like be very comfortable in a variety of situations and say the things that she needs to so that people kind of look the other way. And then we have Enrique, and he is also mixed race. He is part Spanish and part Filipino, and he in features takes after his Spanish side, which actually complicates things because now he doesn't really fit within either culture very well. And he by the way, he very much has feelings about this. We do explore some of that, which was so lovely. But he is also bisexual, pansexual of some kind. He very much has feelings for both men and women. And it is in his chapters, he is very much thinking about it. So it's on page But he is also the historian. So he's the one that is able to look at these objects and understand the history and the symbology and like symbolism. Again, grammar. So he's able to really help with that history kind of aspect. And then we come to Zofia, and Zofia is a Polish Jew, and she is autistic, and she seems to be the like chemistry person who does a lot of inventing, but there is quite a bit of like chemicals involved in her inventing. Now, I said she is autistic, and that is never actually stated on page, which makes sense in the context of the historical time period that we are in, as autism really wasn't described until the 1940s. But she's autistic. Like everything. She's autistic, you guys. Not only that, but the author Roshani Chokshi did mention that Zofia was written to be autistic. And so I really liked Zofia. She's just she finds math very soothing, which I completely understand. And she is that person that really doesn't quite understand the group dynamic, really likes the group, but doesn't understand the group dynamic at all. And like I said, she's a really good chemist. Now, I want to take a moment and really talk about the autism representation, because this is some of the best that I have seen in media in general. So most of the time when you have autism representation, it's first off a male character. We don't frequently get female autistics, but also it's kind of like variations on Sheldon of Big Bang Theory, right? And this Zofia wasn't completely different, but different enough. We got different characteristics with Zofia, and I found that to be very, very nice. And there were two things specifically that the author did a really good job with. And the first was that it's clear that the author took the time to understand why autistic people kind of do the things that they do, right? So it's not just that they have problems with crowds. It's like the author clearly looked into why so many autistic people have issues with crowds and put that information into Zofia's chapters. And so it doesn't feel surface level, right? It feels like there is an understanding that that autism is literally just your brain works differently. And it was very evident in Zofia's chapters that that was the approach that the author took. And the other thing that I really appreciated is the relationship between Zofia and Layla, because Layla has clearly understands the world, but also clearly understands Zofia and understands where there's going to be friction between the two, and has kind of appointed herself a liaison. Basically, she's going to teach Zofia what she knows so that Zofia can make the choice that is right for her. So as an example, in the story, Zofia has to get ready for some kind of party where she has to wear a dress, and Layla had actually laid out 3 different dresses and said the first one is going to be the least distracting because it doesn't have any asymmetrical frills or anything like that. The second one is going to be the most comfortable, and the third has a lot of embroidery, so if you get very nervous, you can count the stitches, which just shows how Layla really understands Zofia, and like that Zofia counts when she's nervous, that she would be distracted by asymmetrical frills, that she really values comfort in her clothes, and basically says, I know that these are the things that seem to matter to you the most. Here are your options. You choose what's right for you. And I just really, really appreciate that approach. So overall, these characters in general, I do think are pretty well developed. We get a decent sense of who they are, as well as some of their backstory and what they want out of life. And it's not ever super in-depth because we have 6 different characters to really get into. So we don't have that kind of time, but I think that we did a really good job with the number of pages we had to devote to character development. And same with the relationships. We didn't explore all the different relationships between the various members of the group, but we did touch on a lot of the important ones. And it has a really great group dynamic where they feel really comfortable with each other. Like maybe they've actually been together like for 2 years, like their history states. They've been together for 2 years and it shows, and that's so beautiful. The only issue that I have is that it's clear why some people are staying with Severin, because he is the logical, like, it's logical to stay with them to continue on with their kind of life goals of sorts. But two characters, Enrique and Zofia, I'm not really sure why they're still with Severin, because I'm not sure how it's going to help them get to the next step of their like overall life goals. So that's very nitpicky. Let's be real. But other than that, I do think that the characters are a very strong point of this book. So next up, let's talk about the plot. And this was really interesting because I thought going in, this is going to be straight up heist. And it is a heist book. However, it's not Ocean's 11 heist. It's Indiana Jones heist. It's not like... So Ocean's 11, if you don't know, really focuses on the heist itself and how the various people are going to circumvent security measures, right? All the cons that they're doing. Indiana Jones is just more like there's hurdles being placed in front of him, whether it's people who are trying to get him or trying to stop him from getting whatever archaeological object he wants to get, or these ancient puzzles that are in his way. And there are puzzles in this book. It's very Indiana Jones. There's a lot of puzzles that our crew has to solve in addition to actual like con work. And it's cool because there's actually pictures within the book with like to help you with visualizing it. So I actually really liked that. I wasn't expecting it, but I really liked it. However, I do think that the plot ended up feeling a little thin in points. So like I just think there were too many stages to this particular like eventual heist. This is very difficult to talk about without spoilers, but essentially I just feel like there were too many stages. And I really liked where we ended up. I just think because we had so many stages, sometimes it didn't feel as well developed as I would have liked, and it felt a little bit uneven from point to point. So I do think that that could have been done better, but overall, I still really enjoyed it. As for the pacing, writing style, and structure, it's a fast-paced book, and just so you know, this is multiple perspective. There are 4 different perspectives that we are following, and I actually had no problem switching characters. Sometimes I get really confused. I really didn't have any problems. I found that the characters were unique enough that it just worked just fine for me. But that is it, you guys. I ended up really enjoying this book, and I gave it 4.75 stars. Not quite a 5-star because the magic system, really, and a little bit the plot, but mostly the magic system. I just couldn't quite do 5 stars. But I really, really enjoyed it. I'm very much looking forward to the next one, and I kind of want to pick it up right now. Is how much I loved this book. But go ahead and leave me comments down below if you have read this, if you are interested in reading this. Tell me your thoughts about this particular book. But that is all I have. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!